Hi everyone, welcome to Community Builders Show. My name's Nurse Phill, founder of Supportworkerhub, and really glad to have you all aboard. Today we've got a really interesting guest. His name's Antoni, and I'll get him to explain to you what he does and everything like that today. So welcome, Antoni. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So what do you do, Antoni? What's the name of your company and what do you do?
Sure. So my name's Antoni Mitchell, and my business partner is Sanaz Gorchian, and we started a company called Lead Your Life, and we established this in 2018. And I guess the idea behind it was that we saw firsthand working for larger providers in the transient living space, which is short-term accommodation respite. We found that a lot of participants who were utilising the service got a lot out of it, and it really helped them to ascertain the independent living skills and the individual capacity to move into long-term living solutions when their caregivers or families were not necessarily able to look after them in a full-time capacity. So it really helped enable them to gain those skills. We also found on the flip side that people who were not coming into transient living or short-term accommodation, they found it very hard, and they struggled both physically and emotionally to transition because there was no prior transition plan, So
Yes.
so essentially it was, we found that there was a real gap there, and the providers that we were working for didn't necessarily really understand, the nature of the service, and how it could really benefit people and increase quality of life indicators. So we went off on our own. So yeah, that's sort of our little about me, I guess.
Well done. No, that's very good. I'd like to unpack that a bit more because you went through a lot of topics and things,
Sure.
and want to make sure that our audience understand what they are. So, what is a short-term accommodation? What is that?
Sure. So I'll briefly run you through what the NDIS consider short-term accommodation to be,
Yes.
and it's pretty straightforward. So the NDIS define short-term accommodation, or STA, or respite, as it's formally known as
Yeah.
funding for support and accommodation for a short-term stay away from a person's usual home and away from a person's usual caregivers or informal supports, so usually parents or guardian. It covers the costs of accommodation, of meals, of support workers, and usually transport and activities. Some providers will tell you otherwise, but it's usually dependent on the agreement between the provider and the participant and or their plan nominee. So that can include, that can include things like pick up and drop off from home. Maybe that the respite can be packaged so that the person will go to, say, the Easter show whilst they're staying, and that can be packaged into the short-term accommodation funding. All of these things can be achieved. So essentially, that's what it is.
How long does the short-term funding accommodation last? Is there a time period where you go, after this period of time, no, we have to consider something else, some other alternative accommodation?
Definitely. So the NDIS will usually fund you for 28 days per calendar year or per NDIS plan, which is usually annual. However, there are definitely extenuating circumstances that can enable participants to receive more. That can be, for instance, that could come about because the participants' caregivers are aging, and they have severe health concerns themselves, and the person isn't necessarily ready to transition to long term. So short term is required. There are other options there. For instance, medium term accommodation, which is usually for people who are a lot more independent, but they do need a place to stay. And that can also really help bridge the gap for people who are homeless as well, but don't necessarily need a lot of support. Yeah, so you're paying for bricks and mortar per day. I think I've forgotten what the rate is off the top of my head, but yeah, then you source your own support workers and things like that. Can be a bit more flexible. But yeah, short-term accommodation, 28 days per calendar year, and usually 14 days stay is the maximum. However, that's completely flexible.
So you can stay up to 14 days normally, and then what, you have to go away and come back, like you go home and come back? Is that what it means?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it possible to stay 28 days straight? Just say if you're from the country coming into the city, say, and you wanted to spend it a month and look around and, access the city for a month, could you do that sort of? Is that a possibility? That sort of?
100%, 100% it is. And obviously it would
Yeah.
need to tie in with the participant's goal, NDIS goal. So, naturally if the NDIS have, sat down with the participant during a plan review and stated that, the participant's goal is to go away for a month, and that's stated in the plan, then, they can go for it. That's completely fine. And that's, a lot of providers are using short-term accommodation for that purpose, and a lot of participants are getting a lot of value out of that.
Yeah.
I guess, the concern with that is if short-term accommodation funding is given to be able to, for a participant to get, the opportunity to build upon their independent living skills, going on a holidays, you're not going to really achieve that, are you? It's, you're going for fun, which is great, mind you. It's the social aspect, and a lot of people that really suits. But if someone, really needs the service to build upon their capacity, the going on holiday is obviously not, it's not ideal. But that's the nature of short-term accommodation. It's very flexible in that regard.
Yes. So what do you aim to achieve with your version of short-term accommodation with people? What's your goals?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned prior, myself and Sanaz worked for larger providers in the space. And from our own experience, many participants who began to transition into independent living options, so long-term SIL homes, ILO options rather, due to either a decline in the caregiver's health, or, just really wanting their own space. They struggle both physically and emotionally to do this as they've had minimal experience, right?
Yeah.
So we really went off to specialize in the transient living space. And what we do is we work in tandem with capacity building providers like OTs, primarily OTs, but also exercise physios, behavior support practitioners, speechies, to really provide a really tailored, personalized experience for participants. So it's a lot more comfortable for them. The notion of respite or short-term accommodation is a lot more comfortable for them. So that's our specialty. We really want to provide participants with the ability to build upon their skills. So when the day comes where they have to move into a group home or an ILO option or social housing, that they have the skills.
How long does it take a participant to gain those skills? Because I'd say if you're in your home for, say, like 30 years and you've got elderly parents and they've done everything for you, is 28 days enough?
Definitely not. Definitely not, Phil.
Yeah.
And I guess, that's a multifaceted
I know it's a
statement
big
you've just
question.
made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can break it down into two or a few components. It's very hard, as you said, for people who are living at home and, have everything done for them or have limited responsibility, because obviously families love their children. They want to do as much as they can for them,
Yes.
So naturally it's a jarring experience. So we actually have one participant who sort of falls into that category, and they are staying with us now. And they initially, when they came, again, found it very jarring. We wanted the person to do their own washing, and we supported them in a way and in a mode of communication that was effective for them, because we had known the participant prior, through community access supports that we also provide. So we would utilize the knowledge that we had about the participant to be able to transition them and really engage them in that. And now, believe it or not, the person's doing their own ironing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're directing the service as they require. That's
Yeah.
exactly what we want for our guys,
And was that in the 28 days?
Oh no, that's taken a year and a half to achieve.
So every year, do you like set out like periods of time? So give us an example for that case. Like how many times in a year would they come to you?
It's a bit tough because 28 days, if you want to break it down monthly, it's you're going to have a situation where if the participant comes in, say, on a Thursday and leaves on a Monday morning or a Sunday, that 28 isn't necessarily divisible by 3 or whatever it may be, So there are going to be times where maybe it's 3-day stay and then next month it'll be a 2-day stay. Usually it's monthly. However, On the opposite end of the spectrum, because we service a multitude of different participants with a multitude of different disabilities,
Yes.
we have people with level 3 autism, complex behavior support plans, and complex intellectual disability. Really building upon their independent living skills is a lot more of a slow but consistent, regime.
Yes.
So we have one person who is funded for more than 28 days because the person requires it. And, really building upon their independent living skills can sometimes be secondary to ensuring that the participant's emotional and physical and safety needs are met first.
So you're able to negotiate for some people to have longer than 28 days for a transition.
Most definitely.
So we've got 28 days a year, and is there so many years that you can do that for? Or is it just keep rolling over 28 days every time they redo a plan?
It's a very good point. And look, the NDIS don't necessarily really like funding for short-term accommodation on a longitudinal basis, because it is a transient space. The idea is to build capacity for long term, which I believe is also a bit more financially sustainable for the government, which is obviously a concern and something that everyone in the space needs to be wary of. But yeah, so from a longitudinal perspective, no, the NDIS don't like funding for it. But if the need is there, they won't say no. It's all about choice and control at the end of the day. And if the participant requires it, then they won't say no.
So
and at the end of the day, look, short-term accommodation funding falls in the core pool of funding for a participant NDIS plan, which is flexible innately.
And so what do you do then? Because you could see that people would just love to come to you and get the support. What do you do? Do you have a program to like gradually, because it is a transition, have you designed a program to transition and get certain goals that they need to achieve to get to that transition?
Yeah, definitely. So not only do we work in tandem with the participant and their chosen community and support network to work towards achieving the NDIS goals, you'll find that NDIS goals are quite broad, and possibly even diffuse. So what we do is we do intake with participants prior to their stays, and we come up with something called an individual service goals, which pretty much just break down NDIS goals into more meaningful, achievable chunks. So, for instance, if someone, their goal is to attend respite to sustain their informal supports, which again, very broad, we'll break that down into things like building the individual's capacity to do their own washing. So, for instance, when they go home, their aging caregiver they're able to have a bit more of a break in their own home. So that's sort of, from one perspective, we break down NDIS goals into individual service goals. The other component, I guess, would be meeting with a variety of other capacity building providers who work in tandem with the participant, and we break down the goals into health goals.
Right, yeah. So like exercise and like that, and personal hygiene, that
exactly
sort of thing.
Right. Exactly. So we'll support participants. I'll go back to the participant I was discussing prior. They engage with an exercise physiologist, and whilst they're here, we'll support them to access that EP in a one-on-one capacity to ensure that there's continuity of service. So it's a very holistic service.
Yeah, totally. So it really helps them build that capacity. And then, so your job is to slowly back off the support and make them get a bit more independent until they go, hey, look what I can do. Like, I can do the ironing now. Is that sort of the
Exactly
philosophy
right.
you run?
That philosophy is sort of underpinned by an evidence-based practice that's used pretty congruently across the sector, called person-centered active support, which was pioneering methodology of supporting people with disabilities. I believe it was established in the UK by several individuals. One, Professor Julie Beadle Brown, she was one of the pioneers, I guess you would say. And they developed this as they found that people living in group homes in particular were very unengaged, and engagement rates were quite low. And you found that people with, who engaged in complex behaviours of concern, their engagement rates were even lower. And person-centered active support essentially, through the 4 core modules of it being every moment has potential. So the idea is that every moment in one's day, there is an ability to engage someone in a way that is meaningful and empowering for that individual. So one person may be able to wash the dishes while someone, may be wheelchair bound, and you can introduce something like assistive technology, for instance, and the person may be able to do the washing up in their chair. So, there's potential in that moment that you or I may find mundane, but that's very empowering for someone who may not have had the opportunity to do it prior.
Yes.
And then there are several other modules,
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I was just going to go on a bit further with that. Do you have a case study of where someone's come to you with not knowing what they were capable of, and you've gone, here, have you ever tried this, like even washing the dishes or something, and that they've gone, oh my gosh, light bulb moment, Do you have any case studies like that?
Lots. I can give you 2. So one participant, one of their goals was, one of the NDIS goals was travel training, and the person was finding it quite tough to get onto buses, for instance, because they were quite short of stature, and had scoliosis and things, so they were finding it hard to get onto the bus. And we worked in tandem with the because it was a local bus route. It wasn't, one of the big bus players. It wasn't a metro or anything. And we worked in tandem with them to be able to do things like, introduce not necessarily a ramp, but like additional stairs to get into the bus. And we would support the participant to update their Opal card, and put money onto their Opal card. And now they're able to get the bus down to the shops. So that's one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That was about a year's. That took about a year for this one individual. And then we have another participant who comes semi-regularly in a 2-to-1 capacity. So that's 2 staff to 1 participant. So participant engaged in some complex behaviours of concern. And this person hasn't been able to even cook their own meals for years. And it was about a month ago, we were supporting the participant to make their own breakfast, and they were cooking at a gas top, which was unbelievable achievement.
Just never done before.
Or just years ago, and because there's been a real lack of short-term accommodation in our area, and for that demographic, they just haven't been able to access a service who would be able to get the participant, to participate and engage at that level, so that was just a huge moment for the participant, which was great.
Oh, that's fantastic. See, these are the good stories. See, these are the things that proves the value of what you're doing,
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's what it is. Do you actually take people out and like show them, like the person with the bus? Do you actually step it out with them, like walking from the front door, getting your Opal card out? Can you take us through, like, no names or anything, but like how the actual process works?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, in this instance, the NDIS and the participants sat down and said that one of the NDIS goals for the following year or 2 years in this instance was to acquire a level of training to be able to travel somewhat independently. Now, again, very broad, and it's not broken down. So we engaged with an OT initially. And in this space, we were the community access provider, but also the short-term accommodation provider. So in this instance, we were able to provide this service, this sort of, I guess, goal oriented service from both a short-term accommodation perspective and community access. So it made it a bit more consistent, I guess. But we initially wrote up a transition plan, and that's the cornerstone really of any short-term accommodation service. Is having a transition plan in place and having the intake meeting and doing all of these things to ensure comfortability. So as part of the transitional arrangement, we engaged with an independent occupational therapist who wrote up a plan and a functional capacity assessment, then gave the go-ahead. And then our individual support workers and the participant's key support worker really worked hand in hand with the participant, getting down to the bus shelter, paying for the Opal online. The participant got a laptop, and we're also building the participant's capacity to use a laptop so that they're able to update their own Opal card. And then, yeah, so it was all small steps. So, the first maybe month it was putting money onto the Opal card, going to the bus shelter, looking at the times, right?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
and then just we would get in the car and go to the shops, and we would just slowly introduce new steps after the participant reached certain milestones, I guess you would say, for lack of a better word. And that was done congruently with the participant, the family, and our support workers.
So it's a real team effort. It sounds like there's a lot of moving parts that you need to get together for them. And so is that run by you, or does their coordinator run it all and you're part of that? How does that part work?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. A lot of participants really rely heavily on a positive, really engaged, and congruent support network between capacity building providers and core support providers. In this situation, the participants very fortunate in that all parties were moving together at the same rate, and everyone was well informed. Obviously, particularly in MMM 6 and 7 areas, so regional Australia, for instance, it's very hard for participants to ascertain a real positive and support network to be able to move forward on these things. So I guess in this instance, the participant was just very fortunate
of where you are.
Yeah,
Because
demographically.
is that something that NDIS could look at, is like bring participants maybe from a country to come to you guys for like the 28 days and then send them back, or is that too disruptive?
No, it's definitely not disruptive, and you'll find that a lot of people would, really like doing that. But I guess a lot of the selling point for that is it's a holiday for it's I'm able to get outside of country, and I can go to Sydney City or Melbourne City or the Sunshine Coast and go to movie world and whatnot. And STA providers sort of package. They'll sort of specialize in that space and package their prices accordingly. You'll find that these providers will charge at a 1-on-1 or 1-to-2 rate, and that'll be minimum. So it's a bit prohibitive for a lot. It's prohibitive for a lot of people.
But they're not building
expensive.
capacity then.
Yeah. So, and that's sort of why look, the NDIS don't really like funding holidays, I guess, through STA. It's definitely holidays are definitely funded to build capacity to travel, and support participants. Maybe they grew up in a culturally and linguistically diverse background, so maybe they want to go to New Zealand because they're Kiwi or they're Maori and they want to go back and experience the culture. That's all funded, most definitely. But yeah, usually holidays and, going and staying at, the Holiday Inn or whatever it may be, it's not really funded, and the NDIS is sort of cracking down on that space at the moment.
I was thinking more of, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're right.
Because I was thinking about more of the point of, like, you've got an amazing team, you've got all the support and resources with you here. They don't out in the country. Could they come and do the training and stuff with you? Because they're going to have the exercise physiologist, they're going to have the speechy. They've got you there. Doing it all here as a way, or is that not a?
It's definitely something we could definitely provide. We haven't had that experience as yet. It's definitely something we would look at. I guess just because as I said, the major selling point is that I'm away from home. I want to experience something different, and then they come here and we get them doing their washing. They may not necessarily enjoy it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's something that's one of the core skills they need, isn't it? And that's what we need to build with them. And like you say, out in rural, remote areas. So I've got a lot of family out in those areas. It's very sparse. There isn't you can't click your fingers and get an exercise physiologist. That you're not getting one. You might get a Zoom conference, as much as you could. So Do you have any partnerships, or do you talk or collaborate with anyone that is in rural areas that have short-term accommodation, that seeing
Well,
them out there?
no, because there aren't really a lot out there. There
Oh,
are,
wow.
yeah,
Really?
usually there are some, SIL or ILO, providers out those ways, even at, Orange or those types of areas in New South Wales, which is still considered regional. I went over to Orange and Bathurst a couple of years ago. I believe there was one short-term accommodation provider out there at the time, and they weren't getting a lot of business from memory. So, there's not a lot of choice. There's not a lot of competition out there, and because of that, I guess participants miss out on that opportunity. But yeah, we'd be very much open to that. Most definitely, we'd love to be able to bridge that gap and help people, build upon their skills.
The skill sets, because it sounds like, because like in those rural remote areas, you've still, like, good example is the aging parents looking after their child and doing everything for them, and not having that skill set of people with expertise that could come in and go, right, let's help you build up so you can do your washing and do
Mm.
your ironing. Must be tricky for them out there.
Yeah, it would be, and I guess a lot of those people, in regional Australia would rely on individual independent support workers a whole lot more than in city centres. And I'm sure they're doing a whole lot of great work out there. Independently, they're working with people who are located in areas where that it's quite sparse in terms of the amount of providers. So yeah, I'm sure they
Yes.
rely heavily.
On their the support workers do an amazing job, because they cover it all. They have to be everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, but it is good for them to hear, because that's a lot of support workers listen to this show, and it is good for them to hear that, like you said it. And one thing that really triggered me was, you said it took a year to work out it's, you might get 28 days, but it's not going to change that quickly. And the individual support worker actually doing their little bit every day, you're just going to see little things for a long time. And then when you look back, you go, oh my gosh, look what we did in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the sort. I just got that from the way you were talking and how you actually help people. And it's like, we're not here doing this all bang, wang, bang. In a weekend, we're going to do washing. Next weekend, we're going to do ironing. And so it doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it's a very slow process.
Yes. So like ironing, how would you get someone to get to iron their own clothes? How would you start that process with someone?
Well, definitely risk assess. First thing you'd have to do is risk assess, because there's an innate risk of burning yourself. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to do this in tandem with the family and the participant. And then you want to make sure that you have appropriate equipment that's tagged and tested and everything's safe. And then ideally you do that in a one-to-one capacity, whether that be in a respite or a group home or at the participant's home, whatever venue it happens to be. And usually, depending on the participant's capacity, you want to do something like hand over hand support, for instance. So that's where the support worker sort of guides the iron on top of the participant's hand in a way that isn't, intrusive. And obviously, this is dependent on the participant's capability of doing that. And then eventually, slowly but surely, you start removing that hand over hand support. And the participant's able to do that because you've modeled that behavior or that movement for them, and you've walked through why we're doing things a certain way. So it's a very lengthy process, and risks must be taken into consideration.
That's good to know. And it must take a lot of time, like you said, like you're doing hand over hand with them, but knowing when to not give too much help and when to take that help off. How do you learn that?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate. We have a fantastic cohort of individual disability support workers who are very well trained and very well versed in the sector. And they report in. I work very closely with my team, and they report in quite regularly. We obviously do our support records, so we'll track individual service goals, and for this participant, particular ironing is one of them. We'll track that way through our participant management software that we utilize. So yeah, it's a lot of verbal notification from my team, tracking with the participant whether they're comfortable moving forward, and what other things we can put in place to reduce the amount of support. It's sort of a catch, isn't it? To provide a good service, you want to provide the least amount of service required. So
yeah, but that's like working like nursing. When we're moving people, we do an assessment to work out how much can a person do for themselves, even if it's rolling over and holding a bedside. We get them to do that because you understand the value of independence and keeping function as much as possible of what you've got, and working with them.
Exactly.
And that's what it's about. And so that's why I really love what you're saying today, because I think a lot of support workers will hopefully take this on board and go, because I do talk to a lot of support workers and they do get a bit, go, oh, I'm just doing the same thing every day. And it's like, yeah, but your client's probably making those little gains all the time. And that's what you're looking for. You're not running a race. You're not doing a 100-meter. You know what I mean? This is taking time. So those little things, and the more independent you give them, the better they'll be for it.
Exactly
So,
right. Practice makes perfect. That's it.
and that's the way it works. Is there any other part? I've really enjoyed this discussion, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I realise
No problem.
we've gone a bit more, but it's been really engaging, and there's been so much good information you're giving us. I really appreciate it. Is there any other information you want to give our viewers?
Look, you sort of opened up a bit of a can of worms, and I'm sort of interested now. If anyone out there would like to know a bit more about short-term accommodation, or it's an emerging sort of market, I guess, and if participants want to learn a bit more, I'd be more than happy to have a chat or do a bit of coaching with support workers if they'd like to learn a bit more about STA, because you don't have to be a large provider or even a small to medium provider to be able to do that. You can provide short-term accommodation as an independent support worker, and that's, as I said, it's pretty much just you're taking a participant away from their usual home and supporting them to build upon their individual capacities to be able to do things that everyone else takes for granted. So if someone wants to have that discussion, I'm more than happy to do that.
Oh, that's wow. That's amazing, Antoni, because that's I'll really put that out to the community and have a talk to them, because you're right. We need people like you that are experts in the field to use as a resource, especially when they're out in the rural areas going, what am I doing? They're doing it all and doing the best they can. But if they've got someone like you and they go, oh, I can talk to Antoni, we're away we go. That'd be fantastic. So,
That's great.
yeah,
Would love it.
but it is a big, to me, what you're doing is the independence bit. It is the bit that people want and to do for themselves as much as they can, because that's when you start to feel good about yourself, is when you're expressing yourself and you're going, oh, I can do it. Someone else doesn't do it for me. So
exactly. It's all about self-actualization.
yes, exactly right. So no, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate having you on. Now, got to say, how do we find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can look up our Facebook page, Lead Your Life Disability. You could go to our website, which is, again, leadyourlifedisability.com.au. You can flick me an email. You can give me a call. All my details are on the Facebook page and or on the website. And other than that, we're in Borkham Hills. We're looking to expand into the North Shore in Sydney and sort of a bit further west, so eventually we'll have more sites and more premises, and you can always speak to any member of our team. They're all vetted, they all know what they're doing.
Brilliant. That is great. That is really great. So thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate you coming on the Community Builders Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, that's brilliant. Oh, mate, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I know there's support workers out there going, oh, They might even try doing the ironing or helping people go to the bus and go, let's get out of here. Let's go try something.
Yeah, yeah.
Do it. Go give it a go. And if you got support and you're in a city area, you got support, talk to the people around you. Like Antoni said, it takes a team to do this, but we also know that Australia's not just the cities. We've got a lot of country, rural areas, and like Antoni said, he's there for you if you need any help. He said more than willing to call out. So thank you so much, Antoni. Really appreciate your day.
Thank you. You too, mate.
All right. And wish you,
Cheers.
everyone out there, thank you for watching and wish you all good health and take care from Nurse Phill and the team. All the best.
Cheers.